Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to another episode of Pretty Prophetess podcast, where beauty meets truth and we speak what the soul remembers, taboo or not, unveiling the truths we're told to hide and loving every layer. For the sacred rebels, the truth tellers, and the ones who don't fit the mold, because prophecy isn't always pretty, but it's always real. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today's episode is all about my identity as a biracial being. So I say it like that because, like there are tall beings and angelic beings, there are also biracial beings here on planet Earth, so otherwise known as mixed. So I am black and white. I identify as black biracial. And this is a deeply personal layered story of how I've come to love myself and my identity in entirety, which is a coming of age story here. So sit back and enjoy this show. I want to hear from you. Please comment if you're watching on YouTube. If you are listening in on PodBean, please subscribe to my channel here and reach out on my YouTube channel with some comments. Again, I want to hear from you guys. So, this is a world where, coming of age can be very difficult. And for me personally, there were phases of my journey, especially being biracial, where I felt like I don't belong. I think this is common, especially for young people coming of age, but also mixed kids. I felt often misunderstood. And what's interesting is as I've reflected over the years, is I've realized that growing up, or when my race would come up, or how I identify, and it was triggering to me or triggered someone else, it led to me not processing, being uncomfortable, lack of clarity, feeling uncomfortable in my own skin type of thing, left me feeling not good enough or not enough. And so I think that this kind of transformed into other areas of my life, which is crazy as I wrote this podcast to kind of reflect over this journey, is that I think that this is where a lot of my root, not enough traits and habits that are negative have come through in my life, like not it, really stemming from not being black enough when I identify, or not white enough when I identify, manifested in my relationships as me manifesting, men that I felt not good enough for, or that I would, be in these abandonment situations over and over again. All of this stemming from a scarcity mindset, a lack mindset, separation mindset that during a phase of me coming into my identity, I went through. And so I'm always excited to break silence and use messages like today's episode to push against societal expectations and to give myself permission as an example to others that it's okay to own your complexities and identities and share it with the world. So we're here to face these type of complexities and contrasts on earth to overcome it. We are here to break the matrix in literally every way that we possibly can, and then go out and give to others the lessons we've learned through those experiences. So what you've gained from your experiences and stories are unique, and the way that you speak is a language that will resonate with someone else and really ring a bell, bring people home into their hearts by resonating with your unique storytelling of history or her story. The knowledge and awareness that's gained through life's challenges makes you stronger and more integrated, more whole, which is a major purpose of this existence, is to experience the chaos and dark times, not just to avoid or act like it doesn't happen. We're here to transmute darkness and transcend, okay? There's so much stigma, I think, among different cultures and societies around sharing your story or sharing publicly your truth, speaking your truth publicly, sharing difficult times that you went through publicly. And I think also many families will often hold family members back developmentally by pressing on family members like, how dare you share our intimate stories? Why would you want to share the hard times you went through? Aren't you afraid of judgment? How is this going to reflect on us? This is going to bring shame to our family, but it doesn't have to. That's the thing. A person's truth inside of a story shouldn't shame anyone else. We can grow culturally and societally by owning our actions, especially within our family and our friendships, our intimate partnerships, by not disowning other members of the family or ranking them by their mistakes or ignorances, or kind of holding them to a judgment based on what society says is good or bad, or this is the way to live and this is the way not to live. So we can all grow together if we all stay more open and have clear intentions behind our relationships. And that includes trying to empathize, understand, listen, hear, and receive other people when they share painful experiences as well as happy experiences. So there is this duality to life that we could all be embracing through storytelling and sharing our story. So if a part of your family shares stories that are like you're not proud of, just be real and find acceptance for truth, because I think that a lot of times with society we're taught to, if the truth is scary or societally something that is deemed negative or demonic, brush it under the rug, hush hush, don't go there, um, because it's a lot easier to kind of almost lie or mask or act like it's not there versus standing up and owning the truth. So it's kind of crazy that we've normalized not telling the truth as a safety mechanism. Sharing your story or how you identify affirms visibility. And this is important because if you don't share your own story, for all the listeners out there, young listeners, that are maybe going to learn dialogue through this episode on how they can word or speak truth to their identity or how they see themselves, is important. Because if you don't share your story, the world will fill in blanks with its own assumptions. So speaking your truth on your own terms makes you the author of how you're seen and not a character in someone else's version. Everybody's always going to have something to say about you or the way you're going about things or the way you carry yourself. There's always the judgment everywhere. But you speaking your truth and owning your story really solidifies and anchors you and a groundedness about yourself, which is what is really the most important, is how you feel about yourself and what you exude from your energetic frequency and state. That being could be that I'm a confident person. I love who I am. I'm open and welcoming with people of all backgrounds and diversity. And I'm here to enjoy, experience pleasure with everyone, and as often as I can. So, and that speaks and that tells you, your frequency of how confident you are tells you about how safe you are with other people, how safe you feel in the current situation, atmosphere, or community. Okay. And that is important with making connections in community. So when you articulate your experience, especially the in between of not feeling black enough or white enough, you become a mirror for those who may have thought they were alone in feeling that way, just like me sharing this and saying, I felt this way. Someone says, oh, me too, me too, me too. I didn't know that anyone else did. It's important. So your visibility gives others the language for something they've, potentially struggled to express, which can be deeply healing for you as a human and also the other person. Everybody's the vessel of the soul of the healing. So when someone else heals, if you're a healer, the clientee, the sitter, the person you're healing, as they heal, you heal too, and the collective heals all at once. That's what's so amazing about being mediums of light. So this is why you should always speak up and share how you really feel to give your perception and perspective of reality as a unique expression of God. All of that is incredibly important to your existence. So here's another big one is that shame thrives in silence. So when you speak openly about who you are, even when it's taboo or misunderstood, you send a message to yourself that I am safe to be seen. That's huge for personal power and for aligning your energy with abundance in every area of your life, from relationships to work to health, okay? Wealth. Visibility isn't just about being seen in a social media sense, it's about being witnessed in your wholeness. There's something so sacred there and powerful. And for someone who's carried a not enough narrative, for me, it's an act of reclamation. So as a child, I always felt comfortable explaining that I'm mixed or black and white and with some sort of bridge of love, between kind of opposing or opposite races that in my family, for the moment, weren't necessarily any longer opposing each other, but they were blended, and so although like black and white folk came together, here I am, um, there was still a clear conflict between black and white people that I could see. So it's like my parents didn't change the world through their act of love. But the thing is, what's interesting is that I do think that they did help change the world incrementally, very on a very small level. They, their love of coming together of opposing races is magic in a positive direction. That's the way that I view it. I know that others may not view it that way. A lot of people see it as abomination to mixed races. I see it as a way to break curses, break negative spells, negative thought forms, oppression, marginalization, racism, hatred. Love is the highest frequency in the galaxy, like in the universe. It's more powerful than I feel anything. And through acts of love, as discernment, as someone that reads energy, my discernment is that it's a way to, it's a sacred act of understanding one source. That's the way that I see being mixed, is it's a representation of one source. So when I stepped into the real world, though, that's when I really kind of started to question like how I should identify, because I realized the world outside of my little box, didn't see me the way that I saw myself, because I was raised to say that I'm Black and I identified this way for the longest. My hometown is majority white, and I was also raised in the 90s, which is a whole different time. And back then, if you were mixed with Black to any degree, you're Black. And now we live in a very much more integrated, much more mixed world. But as I again went into the real world and realized that I'm not trying to be the spokesperson for the Black community, knowing that I don't have the same experience to fully Black people. I can never relate completely, but I do have an experience through my Black side that I see as myself, and it's important for me to identify this way. A lot of people, they can't believe it, and it's who I am, and so many people think that I'm Hispanic. People think that I had someone just last night. I was walking, and a white man, he pulled up and he was like, "Can I get your number?" And he put his hand like this, and then he was like, I just was ignoring him, and he was like, Numero. He thought I was Spanish. So the way that I've been met with judgment about identifying myself was, it was an interesting journey. I think that was something that was triggering for me. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm this. And then when I got into the real world, and people are like, "You're Black," or black, fully Black people would be like, "You're Black," I'm like, "Yeah." And I remember times of being around like Italian American people, and I'm like, I'm Italian American. They're like, "You're Italian?" So I think being a biracial American, one of the hardest parts is that the world's always kind of checking you regarding your identity. That's probably for me personally one of the harder struggles. for me as I came to, you could say, know thyself, you know, love thyself and own it, own who I am. I didn't understand at first why Black people would sometimes test me. I didn't know that, and I had to learn that that was really stemming from, a level of, is this person safe or trustworthy, being half white or with light skin privilege. So once I had that awareness, it was a lot easier for me to accept myself and situations of um, interaction. I had to grow to understand that and also kind of get out of my box that there are biracial beings or people that actually denounce their blackness. There's many biracial and mixed people with superiority complexes and feel that they're the better race or beings because they have lighter skin. I've heard a lot of people say that, mixed people or biracial people have God complexes. I may feel a little bit differently about that because I think that ye are all gods and goddesses, and that dates back to, ancient Kemetic times that was written. So, I think we all should be carrying ourselves like we are gods and goddesses. I do. Um, but I do not to dismiss that people have superiority complexes, okay? And so my girlfriends were always kind of down to earth and down for the count, go out and protest, hold signs, start conversations and diversity inclusion movements. So, but I know that it does exist and is also adding to why, um, not only historically why there's that kind of check of safety, but also, culturally as well. So another thing that was kind of difficult is like the world put you in a box. The colony did this, are you black? Are you white? Are you privileged? Are you oppressed? And the matrix offers just a very linear identification system that's not all encompassing. Um, it's often segregating and you know, whenever they would ask me, like, what are you, black or are you white? So I'd always put black or two or more races, but there was never really a place that said African Italian American, which is my lineage. So it always felt like my identity within the world was being reduced to something neat or sortable. But the reality is that it's layered and alive, and I'm a blend of like living histories, cultures, and stories that can't be checkboxed. Okay, so I think another hard or challenging part of being biracial is the identity matrix. Okay, these are created beliefs and programs that have been instilled in us for a reason. And the identity matrix favors fair to light skin, straight hair, and if you're black or a darker skinned woman, this can disproportionately influence every area of her life. Yeah, this is both in America and worldwide. And I was recently watching a documentary made by the first Indian American Miss America and Nina Dolvari, and the documentary explained how fair to light skin in India affects everything, really rooted in the caste system where those who worked outside had darker skin and those that were inside had lighter skin and wealth. She was explaining that in India, it's known for a bride's family to give the new couple money at their wedding. But if the bride is darker skinned, she's given more money because it's assumed she'd have fewer career opportunities. And, you know, the film also showed something that was heartbreaking, which was that even in lower income communities, young, darker skinned Indian girls would still find ways and resources to purchase Fair and Lovely cream, which is a popular skin lightening cream. So we see this not only in America, but everywhere. And in America, it's very clear, and we're in a revolution right now to change this and bring justice to this aspect of reality in these matrices. With the age of Aquarius, with the rise of the matriarchy and minorities. Um, This is prophecy and the time is now. Uh, but in America, the numerous measurable ways for darker skinned Black women to face discrimination and oppression is astronomical, facing higher rates of employment discrimination, are less likely to be hired or promoted compared to light-skinned peers, often receive lower pay for the same work. There is discrepancy and racism in the media representation and in dating. Light skin is often more frequently desirable, and leaving dark-skinned women battling both racial and colorist prejudice. The systemic bias then ripples into mental health, self-esteem, economic mobility, and reinforces a cycle where skin tone becomes a barrier to opportunity. We can go on and on between the medical field and the judicial system. It is beyond corrupt and disgusting. And I think for me, where I stepped into this in naivety, okay, was that I developed a sense of shame for who I was, who I am as a light-skinned woman. That's kind of how there's a phase of the journey where I was just like, this sucks. This is a fucked up system that I'm on the spectrum of privilege on, and it produced kind of like a complex of guilt and also responsibility at the same time, where I was like questioning if I unknowingly benefited from a system that hurts my own people. And I think that because of my own trauma, my own insecurities and um, disorders in a way, I that awareness made me want to shrink myself or to avoid being too visible. Um, and I kind of just had to like realize that like dimming your light is not evening the scales. It actually makes the colony get what they want, which is more separation and fear. And, the truth is that hiding doesn't heal anything. It only keeps a much needed conversation um, and change that needs to happen in the dark. So, if you've battled similar like uh, fear or insecurity because of this a matrix outside of even just race. Again, having these conversations is something you want to do. You want to write your story, type your story, use it as a sacred healing ritual to release internalized shame, And for me, just like having this episode does help me to release internalized shame that I picked up as tied to my identity being biracial in this lifetime. I do believe that you're Black, you're white, you're Asian, you're Christian, you're Muslim, you're Jewish, you're all religions. You were that evil person before, now you're the hero. I mean, we go through so many different characters and archetypal energies and stories, and so we are all one source. We can't forget that. That's where we forget in the matrix of being born. The moment you're born, you forget that you're a light, your source, your electricity. That's what's constant. In this realm, the only thing that's constant is change, including your meat suit, which has ancestral lineage and roots. Now, your ancestry also not only tied to your blood, but you could have spiritual DNA. So, like a lot of times, I've got ancestors from different parts of Africa, different native tribes, different parts of like Europe that come through that were once my ancestry, that were once me, So again, we're all encompassing, and the race matrix divides us. It is a slavery matrix. It is cruel, and it provokes fear and hatred that separates us from the power within us, which is soul. And when we're again at soul level, there's none of this shame. There is none of this fear or hatred or a scale of beauty. It doesn't exist. That is man. That is white man. And the laws that have been embedded in us like spiritual implants and through events and fears and that have triggered fear. And so when you do things like, let's say, talk about how you identify, it can also be a peace offering to yourself, to all of the parts of you, the past life parts of you, honoring your ancestors. And I make this episode also to honor both sides of me, both sides. And ancestrally and spiritually, I make this as I've had my ancestors step forward to help me create this. Is like you are alchemizing two different opposing bloodlines. If you're biracial and you're hearing this, that's what you're doing. If you're biracial, you're mixed race, you're black and white, you have bloodline to the slave and the slave master. That is a conflict. You can feel wrong just being you because of your blood. Okay, so doing things like this is called ancestral healing. It bridges between different cultures that make you up, and it also helps understand the nuance and bring communities together through compassion and dialogue and perspective. This is a unique perspective. Who am I? Just an ant in the whole game of life. But the small ant can share and make a ripple and a wave in the ocean. So join me in stepping into a deeply rooted identity reclamation, both personally and collectively. And I feel like it can be scary to come out of the closet from hiding who you are or masking who you are. We often hear of this when people come out with their sexuality, or like me when I came out as a medium, it was kind of very scary. Um, there's a normalization of needing to kind of hide who you are or how you identify, but that's because the deeper the truth, the louder the fear. So I encourage all listeners to step into visibility and self-knowing, especially in a world where we are fighting for our identity right now with the powers at be that are trying to limit human rights. There's an attack on identity to keep us in a checkbox, to keep us oppressed, processed in a system, to keep us silent from sharing our stories and helping to lift someone else up. When you know thyself, you are good. You are whole. You know thyself, it becomes a superpower of authenticity and empowerment. When you know thyself, you have clarity, and you no longer need an outside source to tell you what to do, who you are, or how to be, how to think. So, again, I'm not trying to be the spokesperson for the Black community. I cannot relate fully to the Black experience of Black women or darker skinned women being mixed race. So today, again, I'm sharing my experiences of coming into my identity. And I think one of the larger or largest challenges I faced about being a Black American is that our ancestry and history was ripped and stolen from us. It's kind of like what I was just saying. It's like that disconnect from our soul, our origins, from our African ancestral roots and culture. Here's a big one, and spirituality of our bloodlines. That I believe, especially as a medical intuitive, I'll say that it leads to pain, confusion, imbalance, disease, disconnect, and suffering. It is a tool of disempowerment from the colony. Now, I see this in a lot of white Americans as well. You can ask a white American, like, what's your roots? And they don't know. Most Americans don't know. But I do see that, in my personal story, with my white family, there are more recent immigrants than through my paternal side. There are more American through generations. So find that even heartbreaking. But I do know that my great grandparents on my maternal side came from Palermo, Sicily to New York in America. And as far as my paternal side, one of the stories that I was ever told about African American lineage was that my ancestors escaped slavery in the South and escaped into the North, I believe Pennsylvania, and ended up killing the bounty hunter that tried to take them back to slavery in the South. And that was kind of like a story of empowerment. But my ancestors, that was told there, but there was never like, I'm from this tribe or this area in Africa. I never knew that until I became a medium and asked my blood for the truth, accompanied with an ancestral test to confirm. So one of the first readings that I gave myself after going through training as a certified medium was to channel and find out who my ancestors are. So that was one of the first sit down things I did, literally right after I did an ancestral, .com kit. So trust me, I'll take a pause. I know that these companies are scandalous, but I was just curious to see if it would align with the discernment of my reading on my blood, or just calling my ancestors in. Because I trust my discernment of energy and my ancestors over the test. So, and I encourage all people to do the same. I think this is a big take home also of making this episode, is to share that it doesn't feel right when you don't know who you are or where you come from. You will feel disorder, like have a disorder potentially or disease. You will feel disconnected, lost. So one of the best or free tools that you have at any moment where you are is your brain's power, which is what allows you to be a medium. We're taught to fear our brain, or we're taught to fear mediumistic ability. But I encourage you to use discernment of your gut's intuition, your gut feeling, your soul's feeling of that it is right to tap into the awareness of all that is around me and within me, at any time. It's not high vibrational, you could say, as discernment, to stay in the dark about things, hide things, act as if it's not there, ignore things. Why? Because things begin to fester and build and it becomes a volcano. So awareness is your birthright, your connection is your birthright, and your ancestors come and guide you, your angels come and guide you, whether you believe it or not. And there's a science behind it. There is the right hemisphere of your brain that helps you to channel. And so ancestors and spirit guides and angels, they come and they put it into your crown, the energy or electricity or messages, and your bio spiritual ecology is wired to answer the message or discern the energy. And this usually translates to some sort of thought. Oh, I have a thought. I'm inspired. I just know something. Okay. So although you can't see it, it is actually happening energetically. So I encourage you to tap into your blood. I would call this like a blood reading, or call your ancestors in and ask, who are the top three bloodlines, or, you know, places that my family comes from? Like, where are my blood's origins? Give me some understanding. Who's here to guide me? These are the questions you want to ask. And this actually helps you break the matrix in many ways too, because you're taught to outsource this information. You're taught to fear, being able to read your own body. Medical system says, oh, that's so risky, and it's not good if you can, treat yourself or heal yourself, and you should always come to us. So it disconnects the people even further, I think, from their true ability to heal themselves and feel peace from within, clarity from within, understanding, guidance. So, on a side note, work with me and I'll teach you how to read energy. Everyone's a medium, I believe, to different levels of what I'd call awareness. You're either aware or you're not, because everybody seems to be a soul in a body, okay? And some people are. They don't, we won't get too woo woo here, but most people have soul and body. We'll just leave it at that. So back to my first story. I asked when I first was getting into mediumship, who are just give me a few of my more dominant bloodlines in this life and ancestors. And so Sicily, Mali, and Nigeria came up for me. Now, when my ancestral test came through, it was confirmed that there were higher levels of lineage traced to Sicily, Mali, and Nigeria. Um, there were others in there as well. I do have Polish and Scottish or Irish, Black Irish. In my family, we're known to be Blackfoot lineage. Um, so some of that did come up on the ancestral as well. But something that I did notice is I know again these companies are so scandalous is like there was originally on my first data result was like lineage to Egypt, which I resonate with deeply from past lives, but also modern day Virginia in America. So I'm sure that could trace to native lineage, but those data points are not there today. So they did a switch, which I found is interesting and questionable. When you're biracial, if you're listening to this and trying to figure things out or feel confused, that confusion is not just skin deep, it's blood deep. You have spiritual blood, you have a physical DNA blood, and you're here to unity consciousness. You're here to channel unity consciousness of a dualistic natural nature. And you have to understand that the dualistic nature has been deeply molded by cults. And I'll go as far as I know, again, this is a woo-woo channel, so if you're listening, you probably like it. But I do feel that, extraterrestrials or otherworldly beings were really the slave masters that took over the human flesh possession. Different extraterrestrial otherworldly beings were the colonizers of different places throughout history. I think that it fundamentally is a genetic warfare that a lot of the extraterrestrials do on humans, in accordance with different cults or small societies within the human race. I think they're intertwined. Just for to make this kind of like more simplified, if so, let's say you don't like Donald Trump, you think he's an evil villain, okay? Some might say he's demonic or he's possessed, or I'm saying the same thing, otherworldly, just from my clairvoyant perspective in investigations. There's I call them otherworldly beings. You say demons, whatever fits that. It's like these beings that are very low vibrational, rooted in hatred, control, siphoning, imprisoning, of the soul of the human, of energy, harvesting, are dominating through different humans that lead the government, the world, and they are the ones behind this. I think that when it comes to humans, there's many different humanoids. I think blood type is important. Also, it's often dismissed. It's not part of our like, we have an identification system tied to blood, yes, but we are really more so identified by race. And I think blood type is something to not ignore when it comes to how looking at us as races of humanoids, like Rh negative people can be black and white and of all over the world and have this blood type, and we are known to be more ESP. So it means like our brains are a certain way. We're a humanoid where we're more ESP. Our blood is different, so I think that's a race. Um, when we get into the starseed origins and all of that, again, we're going woo woo here. I do feel that I am a starseed. I do feel hybrid, not necessarily because of being black and white, but more so from being extraterrestrial, otherworldly, and human. I do feel I'm Andronoman starseed, which is a rare starseed. From my understanding, less than a million of us on Earth. Um, and blue-skinned beings made of many different humanoid um, DNAs. So, I guess that's also something that I grew into. When I was younger, I was looking at pictures once, and I would always look up at pictures over the fireplace and be like, did I drop into this family or something? Did I just drop in? Like, I'm different. I am different. So I felt different when I was a kid. I always did. Um, And then I think through my coming of identity um, journey, it wasn't until even in my 30s that I could confidently come out, even on social media, and even identify as like a starseed. Um, so that's been interesting too, to work with ETs, especially as I get into spirit release therapy more and more. And the original training I had explained that the International Practitioners of Holistic Medicine is aware that extraterrestrials are, you know, attaching to humans and leaving devices in them and monitoring them. So I think that that is something that's kind of crazy too. Um, is more of like further proof for channelers that see what I see as well as that's like we're more than just black and white or Asian people. We're there is so much more to us that meets the eye. But back to kind of like my story here. So I didn't really witness racism within my family growing up, but I knew that it existed. On the white side of my family, like there were stories, and this is pretty common, of like white side of my family not happy for my mom when she became pregnant with a black man with me. Um, However, my maternal grandparents were both paralyzed, so I never really had a real relationship with them other than a bond through like kissing and, helping them and then being around. Now, my maternal great grandparents, however, I was very close with, who were Italian American and Polish American. They loved me deeply and embraced me as their grandchild, first granddaughter. Um, so I had a very good life with the white side of my family, in addition to my black side of the family, which also really loved it and has always adored me. But again, in the 90s, it was a very different world. There weren't many mixed kids, at least not in my hometown. Um, so I would always say I'm black. I was raised to identify that way. And although I have light skin, I never really have been known to pass as white. Nobody ever really thought I was white. If anything, people thought I was like Hispanic. So my skin tone kind of fluctuates throughout, seasons from like light skin to like light medium to kind of like a medium tan. And I think that always being met with "you're not black, you're Hispanic" when I'm not was annoying. I think more than anything, it was just annoying. It's still to this day, I don't care really as much. But when I was again trying to come into making any sense of loving me, it was annoying. So um, I was always very involved with like both black and white American cultures, from going to an Italian American Catholic church to, on my paternal side, more of a Black Protestant or of God non-denominational church. My preschool was Catholic. My mother worked at the rectory of St. James in Jamestown, New York for a long time, and so she was very involved with like the Italian festival that they would have going on there. I'd play in the preschool's basement and in the rectory where the priests live, and then on my paternal side, I would be very close with my grandmother, who was involved with a smaller Black church in town, Sunday schools, and Juneteenth. She had me, doing a drill routine. And, so I would say I had a pretty good, mix between my Black and my white side. Fun on both sides, both religious. Both forms of, two different forms of Christianity. I love my hair. I love my skin tone. I loved all my cousins that are white and all my cousins that are black. And I grew up again in the 90s, early 2000s. So we were playing outside. I played with other kids. I played in the neighborhood. I walked all over the neighborhood. I don't think even kids walk these days. Um, so I always felt blessed to be able to get down with the white kids and the black kids and the Hispanics, everybody. And that's something that I feel is a privilege. And it's also one of the biggest blessings that I love about being biracial is I think it's a skill for me, how I'm able to connect with people of all backgrounds. I've noticed that, especially as I got into the real world and started to sell things as a salesman and seeing how comfortable not just black folks or white folks, but Indian and Asian and, people from different areas of the world that speak a different language than me connect. That is what I feel is a superpower. Now, some of the other darker times of being biracial, I remember going as a young girl to my grandmother and be like, "Can I call myself mulatto?" And she was like, don't, I had to learn, don't say that. It's slavery terms, but I was called that by kids. Again, I played outside. There were little racist kids, of course there were in my small hometown. So like I was called mulatto and I'd never heard that. And so I had to, kind of like most Black Americans, you grow as a child to understand the history of racial terms and classifications. And so if you didn't know, from my understanding, mulatto, it was used more of like a slavery colonial term to describe a mixed race person with one parent black, one parent white, coming from the Spanish word and Portuguese word mulatto, mulo, meaning mule, referring to the offspring of donkeys and horses. And so this was like an animal comparison, which is why it's, offensive today because it's dehumanizing mixed race people to kind of put them into like a hybrid or an animal type of category versus fully human. And it does have deep, deep roots in history as a part of racial classification, that determines social status, legal rights, the value of a person in the eyes of slaveholders. Um, so light-skinned or mixed heritage people would often get different treatments in work, opportunities, education, and it created a rigid color hierarchy within the Black community. And this is a hierarchy that echoes today in the form of colorism. So I had to kind of learn, educate myself just through being in situations of people, showing me how they identify me, was more of a growth opportunity for me than I guess you could say a challenge. Didn't really knock me off my horse to be called that, but definitely being called the N-word was triggering. You know, um, I dealt with that. I think in middle school, a white girl came up to me, called me N-word, tried to have me physically fight her. Um, Luckily, my mom always, she didn't play that. My mom showed up at her house, speak to her mom about that one. So I always had someone to have my back, at least. Um, there was a white boy that called me a spaghetti twirling N-word growing up. Um, and again, I had my family back me up on that one too. Um, it was cruel to me. It was, um, I think for me, it wasn't confusing, but yet it was. It was just like, how dare these white people do this to me? And then it's like, but I come from white people. So you just start to feel like you're part of an evil race or you're part of darkness. Like, so that was hard. When those type of terms were, I was labeled with terms like that I had to transmute and grow from. When it comes to differential treatment, I have pretty privilege, light skin privilege, and I would say that it has helped me through life. One thing that I find interesting is that I recently I'm blonde. This isn't obviously my natural color, and people treat me very different blonde, and I'm almost mind blown at the level of attention I get with with lighter hair. I've noticed this um, throughout my life at different occasions, and yeah, it led to a lot of internalized shame. You just feel wrong, you feel guilt, um, and that's something I also had to transcend. Like, how can I make the world better and not just write off of this? I think another thing is I'm a very charismatic person. I have a lot of charisma and faces and moves and voices. It's like indifferent in that way, which is also I have a very magnetic personality. And so what I've had to do is learn not to numb myself, not to hide myself, but more so to celebrate who I am and love me. And, being biracial does make you different. You're not just one box. You're many archetypes, many personalities. I'm the daughter of many worlds, many ancestors, lineages, and belongings. And the reality is also that interracial parents, they have a very different world than their kids do. And so for me to have a sense of belonging was also hard, or to feel heard or received or understood. I never had like a biracial mom or dad or a biracial aunt or uncle or someone biracial older than me guide me to explain the challenges I face or why I would face certain challenges or educate me in that way. I didn't have that. I didn't have that. So when you're biracial growing up and you don't have that, you feel like you just don't belong all the way. You feel off in your own skin. So if you can relate to that, I want to tell you that you chose to be biracial in this life. You've probably been black, you've been white, you've been many races, and you're biracial right now, which is what is important. It's not random. It's revolutionary. It breaks generational chains. It builds bridges of divided worlds, and it expands the hearts and minds of opposing cultures through the frequency of love. So it's more than just an identity. If you're biracial and you're listening right now, dear one, it's an assignment rooted in unity and love, a sacred honor, a living embodiment of two that is one, which is a concept that humanity desperately needs as we fight one another and we kill one another and we steal from one another. We need to remember that this is on purpose. This is on purpose. That person that we hate is a reflection of us in some way, is an aspect of us, is a fractal of us in some way. And I think when we think like that, we come more together and we stop these scales of judgment, not only on skin tone, but of bleeding into other areas like crime, and stopping with these scales of judgment of people with who they love to love or who they want to sleep with. All these scales of ranking and judgment are just, man, messing things up, or they're operating through the lens of ego and not love. I think another aspect of being biracial that I have always felt really challenging was like the constant assessing if you're safe or an ally to Black people, the constant need to defend my Blackness or my identity. Um, I think if there's also like people will test you if you act a way this way and then act different around another race. So the world is judging, and you know, when you're biracial, you have people say things like, "I knew you were Black because of your hair." You'll have Black people say that to you, and you'll have Black people say to you, "I knew you were half white because of your hair." So it's just like, Black people say opposing things, and you have white people, and they say opposing things too. And so like, there's all of these different, like, you're just open to when you meet people something that's like everybody's trying to like put it in a box in their own way, and it's just everybody has a different view. So that's also, I think, as a younger person where the confusion came in, because I'm like, this person sees me this way, well, this person sees me this way, this person's not going to accept me this way, this person's going to accept me that way. White people saying, "Hair, is your hair real?" you know um and then the comments about my hair. So it's just like, you're always facing different views, you're always facing opposing judgments, and it made me afraid to show up in public because I didn't really understand how I should say who I am, because I knew it would be received differently from so many different people. And then also, I mean, it happened so much where I got upset that I didn't understand that like Black people have the right to test lighter skinned people to see if they're trustworthy. I get that now. Back then, I would get defensive. I would get defensive to where I'd be like, oh, there's a Black person. Oh, there's a white person. Keep them here. Like, keep all people here. And I think that I became fear-based, and my mindset was like, I need to defend myself. I got real defensive. And, I'll be real with you, it made me not like people. It brought me into a place of loneliness and pain. And, I really had it set me back in life to hide myself, weight gain, which energetically and in medical intuitive, when a woman gains weight, it's she's trying to hide. She does not want to be seen. And for me, that was very true. I didn't want to offend people. I didn't want to be politically incorrect. I wanted to say, I'm black biracial, and somebody say, no, you're not. So I had to get through all that. I had to grow up. And through growing up, it was just like, it's all good. Like, people are, I think, so beautiful. Like, in the end of the day, when we are open and comfortable with people, people are so beautiful, black and white people, all peoples. Um, and that's what helped me to transcend my own fear. And I think education did too. Being educated on history, finding history for myself made me wiser, and just through common sense of like, well, this makes sense now. This totally makes sense now. Like, another part that was painful for me is like when you're biracial, people will want to know if like your black parent is your mother or your father. And I didn't understand that. I didn't know there was a history behind that. I was just like, fuck all people. Like, what's it matter? That was me in ignorance and naivety, as I share with you my real layered experience. But, um, that has historical roots. It's not just curiosity. So if you didn't know, this is tied to centuries of how gender, race, and power were operated in America. And the one drop rule meant if you had any African ancestry, you were considered Black legally and socially. So within that, gender and lineage mattered. Okay, so children inherited the status of their mother. This is the law. And if the mother was enslaved, her children were enslaved. And if the mother was white, her children were also usually considered free by law. So that legal distinction made people pay attention to whether the Black lineage came from mother or father. And colorism and proximity to whiteness also plays a role in that. And as to why Black people will ask this, because during Jim Crow, and this isn't, to this day, unspoken hierarchy, like a Black mother was often seen as anchoring the child more firmly in the Black community, where a white mother sometimes symbolized passing or being raised with more proximity to whiteness, especially if the Black father, wasn't there. So that created a tension. And a biracial person with a white mom might have been seen as having access to privilege and protection, and even like internalized bias from being raised by someone outside of the Black experience. So, again, if you're any listeners out there that you're young biracial people and you're reacting to how people react to you with how you identify, and you're reacting in hate or fear, educate yourself. You have to also understand human psychology to understand the motive of why people do things. And when you do, you will find connection, so, and it's also if you're trying to build connection or find an identity as a biracial person, like coming into your age or yourself, it's like when people ask you like which parent is Black, it's not about exclusion. Okay, they're not trying to exclude you. It's about gauging authenticity, alliance, allegiance, and shared struggle. So, yes, unfortunately, it can become a gateway, a gatekeeping tool that makes people feel like they're never enough. And that's what the colony wants to do, is continue to divide people even within the same community. but just try to open your mind and see people as good people. Like people are, they want to love. Everybody, regardless of where you're from, wants to love and enjoy. So something else was interesting kind of growing up is like people would say, you don't talk black, you don't look black, you don't act black. And I'm just like, I don't because I look like fully black family members in my family. I look like I have very similar the same hair as fully black family members. I talk like my black family. We act alike. I mean, so you also have to understand that some people also have limited perceptions based on where they live, and some people have never been outside of their city. They never have. They never saw different cultures of Black people or Black people speaking, differently than what they know. So I've had to. It was never anything that was like triggering, but it was always kind of just like that's what you're faced with. We're trying to change society here, and how when we meet people, we address them. You know, that's something that biracial people face over and over again, is they're constantly like, monitored on how they talk and walk. And I think ultimately, as I've come into my identity, there were many challenges of feeling wrong for being half white. There were many challenges of feeling shame for being on a spectrum of privilege. There's a lot of hatred for the race matrix in general. There's a lot of hatred for racism in my world. Um, it was very hard to experience racist people that are in my family on my white side. That was devastating for me. It's very challenging being biracial, I would say, in America, but there is, I would say, more positive than negative, and it is a blessing. And if you are struggling to identify, just not even with your race, but just in general, it's very difficult right now. But you're here on divine order. You're here to bring unity, to say, let's transcend above this. Let's look at the soul, not the skin color. We're here to bring people together and break chains. And so, however you are learning to identify, and this might be in your later years of life, and you're coming up with your own, way to change story. Change your story, change your mind, transmute negativity, and think from the eagle's eye view, the higher consciousness, your higher mind of how every step of your life can bring people coming together and more inclusion and acceptance and diversity, and to stop this genetic warfare and manipulation and fighting to be the chosen ones, fighting to be the better ones, the genetically superior. All of that is like so eugenics and colony. It's a lot of the colony, and we don't want them to win anymore. This is our time to rise and reclaim our roots and reclaim our divinity and knowing, which is our power. So I encourage you to love you, every part of you that chose you and your existence before coming to earth. Love your skin, love your hair, love your voice, own the way you walk and talk and act. Learn acceptance for the ways of living that you normally wouldn't accept. Just keep an openness for the diversities of our species, accept the journey and know that it's a journey. Okay. So I challenge you to get into your higher mind about the perception of this whole reality, the race matrix, whether it's how you're perceiving not just one race or religion, but education. All of the systems right now are really being shaken for a reason and being exposed. So the prophecies of the time. This is our time to come together and love. And when we do it, it starts with loving yourself and you exude that outwards. That's how we change this planet for the best and how we get out of war and come home in our hearts. Being biracial, a biracial being ultimately has helped me to love more, to judge less, and to understand my purpose and belonging here as a connector and a healer, because I do belong here. And my story, her story, does matter. And this was an important story for me to share today. Thank you so much for listening.